Hi everyone. I'm an engineer, manager, and founder. I also happen to be female. So I guess naturally I've been asked quite a few times the question how we as founders and managers can build a more inclusive company culture. And by inclusive we mean how can we empower minorities in tech to become strong engineers, managers, and eventually founders themselves. So let's dive in. The first question that comes up for many people that are open to creating an inclusive company culture is how. So let's have Peter Thiel from Founders Fund answer that.
What is your take on the continued lack of women in the venture capital industry? Why aren't there more? And what is the industry's response?
But what really defines the culture in Silicon Valley is not the executives or the venture capitalists, it's the company founders. And that's probably the place where the disparity is the most extreme. And I don't know what you do about that, but that's where it really needs to be fixed if you want to change things, if you want to change the culture.
So that was helpful. It's not us VCs, it's you founders. I don't really know how you're going to fix it. Good luck. This presentation is designed to start things from the exact opposite end, not abstract hand-wavy terms, not blaming the other side, but instead what you can do today as founders to foster an inclusive company culture. Disclaimer, all points made here will apply to any minority group. The examples I give, though, will focus on female minorities in engineering, as these were the teams that I have a larger sample size with. The next question we need to answer is, why would we want an inclusive culture in the first place? Let's look at the picture in the background, which is taken from Silicon Valley, that HBO show. This is how the world views Silicon Valley today. Why could that be a problem? And I'll actually start out with a counter-argument. Homogeneous teams, such as the one shown in the background, do have better communication than heterogeneous ones in the short term. However, next I'm going to give you 5 compelling reasons why you should still prefer a diverse team in the long term. Reason number 1, diversity enables you to out-innovate homogeneous startups. We do know from research that diverse teams have more ideas thrown into the idea pool than homogeneous ones, which in turn, of course, creates a faster pace of innovation for you. Reason number 2, increase your return on equity. Research shows that a diversified board leads to a massive increase of almost 50% in return on equity, and an even more massive increase in your return on sales of more than 80%. Reason number 3, having trouble hiring? Yeah, unless you're Google, at least in the Silicon Valley these days, you have to look for talent at more unconventional places. Reason number 4, first non-capitalist argument. Well, you feel great about yourself because you're contributing to a world in which everyone is free to follow their passion. And reason number 5, well, that is not a real reason. Yes, there is a legal risk in discriminating against minorities. We have had lots of high-profile lawsuits in the Valley lately, but I do think this creates the wrong motivator, so let's just toss this argument. Today, we're going to focus on concrete action items that you can do as an employer. Now, there's always 2 sides of the coin. It's not all on you. And I'm certainly talking with my mentees about what they can do. But today our focus is going to be on you as an employer. Okay, and we'll start off with unconscious bias. In the background, we see Heidi Roizen, a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. In a study conducted by folks at Harvard Business School, professors asked students to read a case study, and half of the students were assigned the story of Heidi Roizen, and half were assigned the same case, but with a name change to Howard Roizen. The outcome of the experiment was Students regarding Howard as an appealing colleague while seeing Heidi as selfish and not the type of person you'd want to hire or work for. And that is what we call the likability penalty. For a second type of bias, I'm going to use myself as an example. So here's my 17-year-old self walking into a computer shop, seeing a woman behind the counter and thinking, geez, she's not gonna get it. This is gonna take forever. Well, it turned out the lady knew her stuff and got me that internal hard drive I needed in no time. For speed's sake, today we're going to skip assignment bias and dive right into pattern matching bias. We have here John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins saying it's all about pattern matching. What does that mean? Well, after you've gained some experience with employees, you form patterns of who's gonna rock it. And anybody not fitting your pattern will come in at a disadvantage. And that is what we call pattern matching bias. Now, the next point is very important because most people do not understand this. Forming priors is part of all human reasoning. Everyone does it. It is hardwired into your brain. So there is absolutely no use in feeling guilt or shame about this. Now, when I heard this for the first time, I thought, well, that's great. Bayes taught me that having a prior is a good thing. That's a comment for those folks that are more familiar with probability theory. And well, it took me quite a while to grasp that my priors were dead wrong. And so is yours. Why is that? Reason number one, your prior is based on outdated data. The image to the right should say it all. Reason number two, your brain loves patterns. It sees patterns even if none exist. That is to make life simple and manageable. And we call this patternicity. Reason number three, let's assume for a second that there were differences across groups. Then even if that is the case, those differences are far outweighed by differences between individual people. And again, the picture to the right should say it all. Now we're going to talk action items. Your first action item is to internalize that your prior decreases your chance of being correct when assessing an individual. Number two, as we've learned, unconscious bias is part of all human reasoning. So feeling or instilling guilt in others for it is dead wrong. This is what makes these conversations so hugely uncomfortable for us all today. So instead, let's get to work on destigmatizing this whole issue. If we suspect we have a bias or we suspect someone else does, then go ahead and discuss it openly. Now, to begin with, I do advise to do that within a group that you trust. And once we've done that, then comes your action item number three, which is a technique which I find works really well, and I call that role reversal. So when you're about to make a decision, then ask yourself questions like, if John told me that instead of Jane, would I react the same or different? Or if John had asked me for the next task, would I have given him an harder or an easier task? If John had asked me for that promotion instead of Jane, would I dislike him more or less for it? Okay, so these were a few things you can do to counter unconscious bias in your company. Next up, we're going to dive into networking bias. Here are some examples. Let's do a guy's night. This was a friend of a friend saying to his buddies in grad school, and the problem with that was that there was one female grad student in the lab. Next up, example from my own life, meeting your business partners at a Las Vegas strip club. Yet another example from my own life, having monthly sports events, such as a monthly company soccer session. Yet another example from my own life, working in the lab late and going for dinner simply because you're hungry. Now, why, you might ask, would any of these possibly pose a problem for anyone? And to answer that question, let's review what networking does for us. Networking makes us more fulfilled at work. It makes us more confident at work because we get to work with our buddies, we get positive peer feedback from those buddies, and it makes us vastly more successful in the long term in our career if we're well-networked people. From this, we should have gained an understanding of how important networking is for all of us. So here's what you can do to empower all your employees to network. Action item number 4. Veto company outings that cater to the majority. Soccer is a great example. At one company I worked at, we had some pretty hardcore Italian soccer dudes. Now, how can you possibly turn that into an okay company outing? Well, what those folks did is they signed up the company for a soccer tournament with weekly games, and the crux was that these were mixed gender teams. At least 2 girls were required per team. And when there weren't enough women, then they made sure to ask all the partners to come along. And what about folks that never played before? Well, after work, what they did is offer practice sessions with everyone to get them started on kicking the ball. So this is a great example of how you can make it work. Important side note, if someone doesn't join, then keep asking them each and every time. Do not give up and investigate why they do not want to join. Usually there is an underlying reason, I found. Yes, you might lose something. That awesome in-group buddy feel you got before, it might not quite be there as much. But let's view it from the other side. Anytime we create an in-group, we also automatically create an out-group. And that means we're having fun at someone else's expense. Action item number 5, pass around the organizer role for company outings. Say someone's into food, they'll organize a dinner. Next person's into Ultimate Frisbee, they might do a casual Ultimate Frisbee intro game for everyone in the park. As long as it's suitable for everyone, capability and timing wise, it's fine. Action item number 6. Here's an example where I did the wrong thing, namely going to dinner with some other late workers from the lab. So here you probably really ask yourself, what the heck is wrong there? Well, a few years ago, I was hanging out with my coworkers in Mountain View after a late night coding session. And that other coworker that wasn't usually working the same hours saw us while she was walking past. We were having fun, we were having drinks, we were partying. And of course, she felt terribly excluded. She hadn't been invited. And that exacerbated her feeling of already being an outsider in that team. I heard that story years later, and I learned that that changed her entire perception of the team dynamics for the time to come. So what I learned there was, if you decide to go for dinner, no matter what time, if you're the manager, shoot out a quick email to your entire team, always. Make sure everyone is aware that they can join if they want to. This is all about perception. No one should feel excluded. Okay, this was networking bias. We'll now tap very quickly into conscious bias. Quickly because I don't think there is too many consciously biased folks in the audience I'm talking to today. Example number 1. This is Justin Mateen, the Tinder co-founder, saying having a female co-founder would make Tinder seem like a joke. Example number 2. Firing your office manager because she got pregnant. This happened to a co-worker of mine at one of her previous companies. Something I heard at a company outing, women are just better at the repetitive stuff. Partner at Kleiner Perkins, women kill the bus. Well, Here too, I do understand the guy's perspective. In a different context, I've been there as well. I've had the same sentiment. Everyone loves their buddy group. But again, what he's missing is anytime you create an in-group, you also create an out-group. That means you benefit from someone else's unhappiness. So here come your action items to counter this kind of bias. This is very clearly the responsibility of the leadership team. You as leaders have to put in place and enforce zero tolerance policies towards conscious bias. And in fact, I do recommend my mentees the following. If your environment is consciously biased, you quit. So hopefully evolution will take care of that issue over time anyway. Concrete action item for you. Number 7, put in your employee handbook, your culture manifesto, your training material, wherever you write down such things in your company, that it is the obligation of every employee to speak up when hearing someone express conscious bias toward a minority. Staying silent makes you complicit. If you don't dare do it in the moment, that is fine, but do speak with your manager in confidence after. Action item number 8. Explicitly check for conscious bias during hiring. If you detect conscious bias in your test question, that equals a no hire, always, no matter whether the guys rock the math or the coding question. Action item number 9, call out partners and investors that exhibit conscious bias. A side note here, this all sounds easy, but it's very hard to implement in practice. Just a couple of examples, all real-life examples. What if that make or break B2B partner invites you out to the strip club? What if that star engineer you're about to hire turns out homophobic? Very hard to have these kinds of conversations and to make the right decision there. All right, now that we dove into various forms of bias, let's look at the other side and examine the minority employee a bit more. And we'll call a concept called psychological safety to get there. This is a term that Google coined a while back. So a lot of us regularly face something called the imposter syndrome. My husband is one of them. He's a professor in neuroscience. He is quite stellar at what he does, yet every once in a while he's getting into this, I'm not good enough to do what they pay me for here. Now, my husband is a tall white dude. Now, imagine what it must feel like if you not only have the normal imposter syndrome, but also look, feel, and possibly think different from the majority of the other folks. Just take a look at the picture. Focus on the third guy in the row here. Can you feel how this imposter feeling can be magnified? What we as leaders want here is the following. You want to enable everyone in your company, and particularly your minorities, to share their bold ideas freely in geometric terms. Say the 3 ideas here are represented by these 3 geometric shapes. What you don't want your minority employee, the third guy in the row, to do is to only utter ideas that are at the intersection of those 3 shapes, because they want to be liked, they want to be cool, they don't want to be ridiculed. Now that would take away all the advantage you gain from hiring that minority employee in the first place. You want them to be bold and utter ideas that are potentially far out there. And this is what we call psychological safety. So you want to create a company that creates a zone of psychological safety for everyone. How do you do that? Action item number 10, reward risk-taking. Reward far-out ideas, no matter how ridiculous they sound in the first place. Just give positive feedback like, whoa, hadn't thought of that. Let's try that on for a second. can go a long way already. Action item number 11, moderate your meetings. Pay attention to whether someone is repeatedly interrupted, talked over, their point not heard, or later taken on by others as their own. If so, emphasize the point. Hey, that sounds interesting. Let's hear what so-and-so was saying just now. And action item number 12. This is another lesson that I had to learn. You always have to give honest feedback. I had the issue of not quite being able to be honest with my female team member because she was this really nice girl sitting there opposite of me. So what I had to realize is that I'm putting this woman at a disadvantage because, let's face it, we all need feedback to grow. And what this means is you must give critical feedback to all your team members. All right, nearing the end and diving into our last point, which is one-on-ones and mentoring. Well, you do understand people that are similar to you quite well already. You've hung out with them back in high school, or if not that, then later on in college and at work. Now, your goal is to train your empathy, your mirror neurons, so to speak, to get up to par with your minorities employees as well. So I'll assume that in your company you have something going like weekly or so one-on-ones with all your team members. And what you can do in these one-on-ones is about listening. It's really about listening. Listening without judgment and getting to truly pick your minority's brain, figure what's going on for them personally. Ask things like, how are you getting along with everyone? Do you feel you can perform at your best? Anything that is bothering you at the moment. And it's very important that you don't apply judgment when you hear the answers. They might be unexpected for you, yes. And our last action item for today, I believe, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this, that offering access to a regular mentor is helping both your minority employees and yourself. If done right, your employees are more confident and therefore they perform better. And they're more happy and therefore they will have a higher chance at being retained at your company. All right, that's all. Thanks for listening. If you want a cheat sheet of all these action items, check out that link. Thanks and goodbye.